Hi, David Himel, Himel Brothers Leather. So today I'm going to talk about my first and best-selling jacket, which was the Heron A-1 Cossack jacket. A real interesting design. Now, I often talk about what makes my jacket special, and I'm going to go into a lot of detail about what's really special about this jacket. So when I made and designed this jacket, there were no other jackets like it on the market. No one had thought about using this early work jacket design, and it really made an impact. I can say that because almost every brand produces some sort of A1 style now, and some even produce sort of replicas of my A1 styles, which is, you can call it a compliment, you can call it what you want. So the first thing you got to know that I'm going to share is that when I designed this jacket, I designed it from a very rare 1920s jacket in my collection. This jacket had some very unique qualities to it. It had a shaped sleeve. So typical in very primitive early American jackets, the sleeves were more like a tube, but this jacket had a sort of curved arm, so a tubular shape at the bottom and at the top, but with an elbow curve to it, which I thought gave it an incredibly sporty look. And most unique to this jacket was a scalloped collar. So a typical A1 has a very narrow collar, and in this case, this very early jacket that I own had this round scallop shaped collar, which is incredibly unusual in early A1 Cossacks. So I decided to emulate that collar and achieve that perfect shape while still having a good neck shape for the jacket. So I took this early unnamed elk jacket and I recreated the patch pockets perfectly. I recreated the collar, and I recreated the general design of the jacket, but I reshaped the arms just to give it a little bit more of that sport shape. And instead of keeping the body completely tubular, I provided a little bit of a narrow taper to that. And I also kept the very large A-shaped triangular waist gussets that we use to adjust the jacket and lengthen the body for a more modern style. So I'm going to talk about this particular jacket that I made. Now, here in Ontario, we have an annual moose hunt, and once a year in the fall, hunters, after they have harvested their moose, sell the hides to a tannery here in Ontario that is one of the only moose suppliers in Canada. And I have a very good relationship with the owner. So once a year I get a limited supply of Ontario tanned moose hide. We all know about Rocky and Bullwinkle. Moose is a unique animal, bigger than a horse, and iconic to the Canadian North. And because part of my brand is to build iconic jackets, making my Heron jacket out of moose seemed like the right thing to do. Now, one of the reasons we call this jacket a heron is, again, I spend a lot of time in the wilderness, and the heron is an iconic Ontario bird migrating across North America, but I've seen so many of these birds in the summers when I spend time in the wilderness. Ironically, my tannery, which is in Himeji, Japan, that supplies my Japanese hides, Himeji is famous for its white heron castle, and it just seemed to be the right name for my first jacket, making out of Japanese horsehide from the city of the White Heron Castle to call my jacket a heron. Now, I didn't know that at the time because the castle was closed for over a decade, but when I finally got to go and I read the English brochure, I was like, wow, that's karma. So, this is my moosehide jacket. Traditional Cossack jackets were made in the very early period of the 20th century, so often they were button-up jackets. So in this particular jacket, I've used replica, early plastic, deco, 1930s style buttons that are made in Japan. And I have used American waxed cotton button thread that I get from New Bedford, Connecticut. We use a very high stitch count to construct these jackets, and it gives it a very clean, bespoke suit-like finish in the manufacture. Also, one of the things you'll note about my jackets is that the seams are not super bulky where they all meet up, and that's because we skive all the seams and tape them shut. So in this particular jacket, I have my Reese 101 gimped keyhole buttons that we have a great video of me putting in this particular moose jacket. And for the chin strap, rather than using the Reese 101, we created a traditional European style collar, which has these great welted lips. So this would have been the style of buttonhole that people would have used pre-sewing machine button. It's a very traditional European buttonhole. And one of the historical and interesting things about Canadian jacket makers is that they tended to mix European styles with American styles when making their jackets, which meant often they would use these European tailored leather buttonholes rather than a buttonhole machine. Or they would have a double pointed yoke, which was very traditional in European jacket styling. This moose leather is incredibly soft. My tanner makes it mostly for the native and indigenous First Nations moccasin industry, and I would say that the feel of this leather is the equivalent of moccasin leather. Now, normally I make these jackets with the suede side out. A lot of that has to do with the fact that these hides are from wild animals and they have a lot of bite marks and scratches and damage. But in this case, I've decided to make this moose jacket with the good leather side out, and I'm really amazed and impressed with how it turned out. The grain is incredible. This moose have a very pebbly grain, and the finish on this jacket came out just perfectly. So we produced this one with a World War II Marine Corps reversible herringbone twill liner using the green leaf side, and it has a lovely traditional light yellow aniline coloring, which is very uneven, so it has a very nice set of characteristics for it. I think I'm particularly fond of the way this jacket turned out. So I'm just gonna hold it up so you can see the jacket, and you can see the amazing, look at the soft nature of this hide, the way it just bends around. Now, I'm not a huge fan of soft leather jackets for motorcycling, but I am a huge fan of this sort of softer tannage for casual wear. Final note, this big back panel on the Heron jacket, that's very typical of early 30s design. Now, in a modern jacket, you would never see a big, huge piece of leather like that cut for a back panel, because especially with uncorrected full grain leather, it's very hard to find one piece that has an even grain and an even finish and no damage. But back in the 20s and the 30s, leather was not so dear, and it wasn't the major cost of producing a jacket, you would often see single panels that were very large like that. When you have a lot of panels in a back piece, it allows you to take a lot of smaller pieces of leather and sew them together. It's much more cost efficient. So this jacket has a very large back panel, and that is really a sign of luxury. I feel that this is my best design to wear with a suit or a pair of jeans, or even ride a motorcycle if you pick the right leather.